My name is Nicholas Hecko. I'm a third generation master watchmaker. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. And tonight we will be talking to Tommy Jobson from England, English clockmaker. On my side, I have also Andrew Borriero, who is my third year apprentice. Tommy, tell us more about you.
Oh, hi. I'm Tommy Jobson. I'm a clockmaker in Shropshire in England. And I'm probably about a fourth generation clockmaker again, thinking about it. But in our family, it's not been a profession. It's been a background kind of thing. So I'm the first to take it professionally, which I'm quite proud of. And
Close
yeah,
to
so I'm
Welsh border, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Shropshire is just on the English-Welsh border for North Wales. Not too far from Birmingham, not too far from Manchester.
You look also very young. Are you in your mid-30s, I guess? Early?
Yeah,
younger?
I'm 35.
35.
And yeah, I'm not sure I feel particularly young, and my toddler has made me feel a bit older.
So the family tradition continued in form of your desire to continue to immerse yourself in horology. It started with what? How did you get into it formally?
I've always had an interest in horology, and that's thanks to my dad, who's always been repairing clocks as long as I can remember. And he sort of sat me down with a dial clock when I was probably about 10, something like that. And we took a dial clock to pieces and went through it. Or he sort of did it systematically with me, and we cleaned it, put it back together, and oiled it, and got it ticking. So that was the first time I had sort of hands-on with a clock. And then it was from that point, it's really all I can remember thinking I'm going to do is horology. There's never really been anything else, apart from a brief occasion where I was thinking sort of careers, and I was very interested in organ building. And so there was a moment when I was thinking, oh, perhaps, I'd like to look more into organ building. And I did a summer with an organ builder, and that was great. And that did actually help me in horology later on, because I worked on an organ clock, and I'd got some experience and contacts as well to help me with that. But from having worked on that first dial clock, I then straight out of school got a job with the local watchmaker and jeweler, and he's always been very kind to me and been very supportive. And he gave me a very, very good grounding in repairs, sort of basic watch repairs, and client interaction as well, because taking in a repair over the counter and seeing it all the way through. So I was doing that from a very early stage, and then from that point I then went to college in Birmingham, and did part of the BHI course. I didn't actually see it all the way through for various reasons, none of them horological, those reasons. But I did at that time get a job
British
with
Horological Institute course.
Yeah,
BHI course is a watchmaking course, right?
yeah, it's broader. It's the first couple of years are broad. They're sort of more hand skills. So learning to file flat and basic turning on a lathe, and threading, and sort of basic hand skills. So we made in the first year, we made little projects like a watch movement holder, which incidentally I still use pretty much every day. It's much nicer than the version, and made it, and also things like a scribe, which again I use every day, and like a lathe carrier for using with turns, watchmaking turns. But little projects like that give you a sort of a grounding in hand skills. And in amongst that, you then do basic theory. So the train counts and the basic theory, escapement theory, and things like that. So and then later on in the course, you split and say, well, I want to specialize in clocks or watches, and so you go down the individual pathway.
So
That's
maybe
what it was like when I was doing it. I think it may have evolved slightly over the years. So it's more of a degree-based course now, I think.
I think it's fair to assume that some of our viewers are neither watchmakers nor clockmakers, and we are really talking about two different trades which kind of meet at some point. Watchmakers clearly work on a small wristwatches, and they would probably commonly work on a pocket watches, and some, I think as far as they would go, would be restoration or repair of a small carriage clock. But beyond that, it's clock making or clock restoring and repairing, where clockmakers start from anything as large as a tart clocks to big long case clocks to table clocks, and then they would venture down to maybe pocket watches, right? So where do you see yourself in that spectrum? Are you clearly doing clocks now, but are you afraid to tackle wristwatches? And tell me more about your experience in watchmaking.
Well, I've always had a feel that the best watchmakers. I mean, I might be wrong. This is my personal experience, but I find that the best watchmakers are clockmakers, and the best clockmakers are watchmakers, because the clockmaker's understanding of the mechanism tends, and I'm generalizing here, tends to be far higher than somebody who's trained purely from the watch perspective. So somebody who's come at it from just, this is a watch, you undo this screw for this reason, you undo this screw for this reason. You change part number 227 because it's got a worn pivot, and et cetera, et cetera. They don't, when they get an older watch, which is hanging up on them, and they can't figure out why, whereas a clockmaker will be looking at it and he's thinking, well, I can feel that the wear on the barrel bar, that means that the depth thing is all messed up with the center wheel now, and he's got a greater understanding of what's going on in the mechanism, the depth thing and the tolerances, and whereas the watch perspective tends to be just change parts until it works.
I think, Tommy, you're very, very polite here. What I would say, it's much easier to turn a clockmaker into a watchmaker.
Yeah.
Much more difficult to turn a watchmaker into a good clockmaker, because
yes. Although I think the watchmaking attention to detail when applied to clocks takes a clockmaker to be a very good clockmaker, because a lot of clockmakers don't have that last 10% attention to detail. They've got the understanding, and they kind of, the mechanics of it all and everything, they can get the thing to work nicely, but the last little bit of attention to detail of, no, you can't leave that screw chewed up like that, or why are you mauling it like this? It's kind of, that makes me feel, and it's that when you apply both elements, so you've got the cleanliness and attention to detail of the watchmaking perspective and the mechanical understanding of the clockmaking perspective, you apply the two, then you've got somebody who really has a good understanding. It will make a very, very nice clock, and also can restore complex watches.
I'll let you tell us more about your first job, how you got it, and what happened after that. But let me introduce Andrew. Let Andrew introduce himself, because
Sure.
he's in a fairly unique position where he is. We always say that it takes two to make a watch. It takes a machinist and a watchmaker, and the same with a clock maker as well. But he's in a unique opportunity and position where he kind of is trained now in both sides of a trade. Andrew, can you tell us just very briefly a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, so I suppose I was never interested in horology in particular before getting into the industry. It was more just a kind of mechanical background. I liked building things. I liked tearing things apart. I liked seeing how things work and the kind of interactions. So that was kind of steering my path into an engineering degree. But I wanted to make. I wanted to continue to use my hands for my whole career. That's kind of where I saw myself. So this was a very, very, very lucky sort of a break for me to get into, in with Nicholas and do what I'm doing now. And that is basically learning, yes, the watchmaking half of the equation in what parts are, what needs to happen to get that watch to tick, but then also the other side, maybe the kind of unseen side for most watchmakers, is how those watches are actually made, how to make things that are so small. And you get into, difficult situations where you don't even know how to hold on to this part to make it because it's so tiny or light or, so learning both and kind of building my knowledge steadily as one increases, it helps the other increase, and they almost feed off each other. It's I think a very, very interesting kind of a way to learn the trade, I suppose.
And I think you're in a unique position as well to have that kind of grounding doing that. I don't think many people are doing watch repairs and are standing in front of the CNC machines. So it's
I think you could almost fairly confidently say that no one else gets that opportunity. I feel like if you go and learn watchmaking, even especially in Switzerland, you learn how to do general stuff and you're pretty good, or you learn how to do maybe one particular like escapement and you become fantastic at it, and that's kind of what you do, but you never really get into design, or you never really get into actually the making process. You might be in assembly or you might be in hand finishing. So I think I would like to be able to fairly confidently say that not many people have the opportunity that we have, doing what we're doing, especially in Australia as well, and being able to make and design.
And this is why Tommy is of such an interest to us. That's why we want to talk to him, because he's a, again, rare breed where he had the opportunity to work on both watches and clocks early on, and then he was in position to make a decision which career path to take. But instead of me talking about this, Tommy, tell us more about your career path.
Well, just before I do, I just wanted to make a comment about Andrew. It just made me think of you saying then about the kind of rounded up. You're doing all elements of it, the design and the CNC manufacture, and understanding every element of the watch. Is that not what the essence of the Daniels method? So I know that you're not practicing the Daniels method as such, because you're using a kern and spark eroder and all the rest of it. But is it not a natural progression of the Daniels method for somebody who has that kind of ability to take the design from scratch and go through the manufacturing process and come out with the finished component as one person? You're just using a kern instead of a piercing saw.
Well, that's right. I think Roger Smith kind of set that out to be his goal. He wants to learn the 50 something trades of watchmaking and, do everything. And I think that thought process towards designing, being able even just as a designer to go, okay, what problems is the machinist going to run into? I'll fix my design to make it easy for him. What problems is the watchmaker going to run into? I'll change this to make it easy for him. I think that kind of entry path into making a product, whether it's a product to sell or just a product for your own wrist, I think that's kind of the best way to do it. I will say, I do like that comparison that you've made between, how we're doing it and the Daniels method. I would agree. I think it's maybe like a more modern version.
Josh would probably say, use best tools that you have on your disposal.
Is that not something that Daniels said?
Yeah, I think that's what he said as well.
I think that, didn't Daniels say always buy the best machines you can afford, something like that? So, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wonder if he'd have had a Kern if he was around now. I noticed on Roger Smith's Instagram that there's a Kern slipped into the back of the workshop, which doesn't get publicised too much, but
He has, yeah, I think he has 3 actually. I'm sure Daniel's.
there you go. There.
I'm sure Daniel's would have had a Kern.
Yeah.
So Tommy, back to your early days.
Sorry. Yeah. So my first job was while I was walking between the railway station and watchmaking college. I walked past Watches of Switzerland every day, and so it was looking in through the window and everything. And one of the brands they carried was Zenith, and I've always been. I think most people who are at college and learning the trade and things tend to buy junk watches and have a go on them, and so I'd always been doing that as long as I can remember. And I'd got a Zenith, and I restored this Zenith. I was quite proud of it. Got it all up and running nicely. And I suppose I must have been quite a cocky youth. I just walked in to Watches of Switzerland and said, "Can I have a box?" And they were like, "What do you want an empty box for?" And I went, "Well, I've got this Zenith that I want, I've just restored it, and I'd like to put it in a box." And they said, "Oh, sorry, all the boxes are allocated to the watches we've got in stock." And they said, "But we haven't got a watchmaker." And so I walked out of the shop with a business card and a phone number and a potential job. So I saw that through. I got a job working for them as their watchmaker, part-time, and carried on with college at the time. But that helped make my decision to drop out of college later on, because I was essentially already doing the job, which is a very big-headed approach. But yeah, I may have been a cocky youth, as I said. So yeah, I went from that was sort of the start, and then I went into working for Ernest Jones, who were a big, I think they're American actually, Signet Group, but they're a big sort of chain of jewelers in the UK, and they carry Rolex and all they did at the time. They don't anymore. But and part of that was that they had to have a watchmaker on site in every branch. So I was an on-site watchmaker in branch, and yeah, that was my sort of grounding in the watch trade. And then I kind of hadn't scratched the itch with clocks, and so I got a job working for a clock restorer back in Shropshire, where I come from and where I am now. And that was when I sort of had my break, if you like, and realized where my real passion lay. And I was doing very, very lucky that the type of work that he was doing was for dealers and collectors and museums. And so we were working on some pretty exciting clocks. And his approach was trust, was that he knew that what your skill set was, and even if you hadn't done something before, he could see that you were capable of doing it, and he had that trust in you to say, here's a Tompion, get going. And so that really accelerated my skills, experience, and knowledge all hand in hand. That just accelerated it all very quickly for me. So yeah, that was a sort of boost in my career.
And then you decided, after how many years, to go on your own and set up your own business?
Yeah, well, I had a brief sort of trip back into the watch world, which was based on logistics, because my now wife went to university, and so I followed her to Manchester, and I got a job working for Longines, who at the time had their service centre up there, and so I was working as a watchmaker in a watch service environment for a brand, and that coming from rebuilding repeat systems and reinstating missing musical work and automata and Burgery conversions and all of that kind of stuff, to, oh no, you're not allowed to work on that particular caliber because it's not on the list anymore. It's kind of the two polar opposites. So it was a case of head down, earn the money, and then get back into clocks when I could. Was the way that worked.
Any regrets for leaving big brand? I mean, Longines is a big brand, Swatch Group, but they're a serious brand. Any regrets leaving and going on your own?
No, not at all. But I don't regret having worked for them.
Of course.
Because it was an education, shall we say. It was horologically, it didn't teach me anything new that I can think of, but it definitely sharpened my skills. Their approach to methodical servicing and cleanliness and the sort of self-QCing element all the way through the process was streets ahead of kind of a clockmaking environment. So I'd got experience in watches in the past, so I knew how to do a clean job of a service, but then the training element of going to work for Longines meant that, I had to go and do a certain amount of training, and then that really sharpened my skills. And I haven't forgotten that. And I apply that to clocks now as well. The kind of the mindset of cleanliness and methodical approach to things. So that element of it.
I can certainly see that. I failed to explain how we met. We met on Instagram, following each other, and there is a particular detail that got my entire and whole attention. And you just kind of, I said, this is the kind of guy I need to talk to. This, what he's doing, it's absolutely amazing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. So we met on Instagram, but I watch your YouTube videos. I probably watch all of your YouTube videos, and I can see that you're patient. You have enormous attention to detail. You take your time. And this is what we kind of always looking for. When we get a new apprentice in, I say only two requirements. Number one, attention to detail, and number two, long-term commitment. And clearly you possess both. But attention to detail, you can't teach that. And I think this is what impressed me immediately after I watched your YouTube videos.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I suppose it is something that I've always had to an extent, but I don't think I would have had it to the extent I do now if I hadn't had the grounding in watches. I think it's the like I say, that a methodical approach to watches to apply to clocks really it is like you say, it's something that you can't teach. I suppose you need that mindset to start with, but then you can hammer it home, which is kind of what they do in the watch industry, is they really hammer it home.
You can say that watchmaking, like logistics and process, kind of hones your attention to detail.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The process of servicing a watch is, for me, largely about cleanliness. I suppose it's a bit of a kind of an OCD thing, to be honest. I've been known to re-clean things like that mean that I'm no longer making any money on doing the job. This is now just me getting the job right, because I've had to make an adjustment or something. To me, the fact that I had to take that part off to make an adjustment and put it back on again, it's no longer clinical enough for me. It's kind of, okay, I'll work through it. I'll get any other problems out of it, and then I'll strip it back down again and re-clean it. And yeah, I won't just get it working and then that's it done. So and I do that with clocks as well. And I won't say I'm the only one. I can't be the only one, but I don't think there are many of us in the clock world that do that. I think a lot of I've seen a lot of clocks where they come in and the owner didn't put all of those fingerprints all over the movement. That's the last guy. You know, it's so yeah. I think there's definitely an approach that I like to carry into the clock world from watches.
Tommy, I have to
Yeah.
interrupt you because again, I'm trying again to explain to our viewers why are we talking to each other? Why a clockmaker / watchmaker in England and clockmaker / watchmaker in Australia talking to each other? Why are we doing it? My take, and you might disagree with me, and you might agree with me. I hope you will agree at least with some aspects of it. Is that we live in strange times where horology, the science of watchmaking and clockmaking, with its practical manifestation in making things, pulling them apart, putting them back together, the knowledge about clockmaking, the excitement about watch and clock collecting, the whole world, people who talk about it. I feel that has been now, thanks to internet, in the last maybe few years, maybe decade or so, I think that attention has shifted from people who are within the trade, you and me, people who know what they're talking about, or at least who are honest enough to call ourselves students of horology. All that focus has been shifted to people who are far more skilled in presenting themselves online, influencers, bloggers, forum people who get together and talk about watches. And main concern on those watch forums is about the external, what you can see about the case size, about the dial color, about how that watch sits on my wrist. And there's nothing wrong with it. But I think that nobody really cares about us. And not that anyone owes us anything, but the fact is that big brands are now doing all servicing in-house. They no longer need independent watchmakers. Even buying and selling to a degree has bypassed us. People trade directly. And you have that if this is not enough, you have that monster called Google reviews, where anyone at any time can go on your business site and leave feedback about you. It can judge you not just as a watchmaker or clockmaker, but as a person. It can leave a personal remark, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I feel, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I feel a need to introduce or reintroduce ourselves to general public, and that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, definitely. The watch. My take on the watch industry. I mean, I used to be, having come from beginning in the, professionally in the kind of watch industry. I think that I've kind of seen where we are today develop over the last 10, 15 years, during my career. The parts issue, which we could go on for hours about, I'm sure. When I first started with the local watchmaker, wasn't so much of a problem. Pretty much the only thing you had trouble with was Rolex. Everything else you could do. It was fine. Now, good luck getting Amiga parts, and certainly for older Amigas. And if you can, the only people out there supplying them, the prices are, like just because they know that you can't get them. So the prices have all gone up accordingly. So that's a big problem. But the influencer type side of things, I'm afraid I don't have, it's probably a very controversial statement, I don't have a great deal of time for a lot of it. I mean, the whole Paul Newman Rolex scenario to me is Emperor's New Clothes. I just don't get it at all. It's a Rolex that at the time was sold knocked down because nobody wanted it and they couldn't sell it. And it's a nice watch. It's quality. We know from watchmaking perspective that Rolex make beautiful movements that are built to last, and you know, that element of it is great. But the premium that is now on that reference number is for what reason? It's completely built by the industry around it in terms of influencers and bloggers and people. They've just created this storm around that style of watch. And then I mean, this is a whole other topic that I could go on for hours about again, but you've got the Steel Sports Rolex thing. That off the back of the whole kind of Paul Newman type industry, you've then got the fact that Rolex are kind of closing down their ranks in terms of they're fueling the fire by saying, oh well, we're only going to supply so many of this type of watch, so then people want it more. So that whole kind of thing, I think, completely feeds what you're saying, which is it's not about the watchmaker anymore. It's about the branding and about the whole kind of, you know, what the influencers say goes, becomes reality. And then on the flip side, that kind of stuff is completely overshadowing things that are going on in the background. Yourselves being one of the ones that I would list, but I'd also say things like Frodshams watch as a prime example. I mean, what are the figures? You could probably buy. Well, how many Frodsham watches could you buy with a Paul Newman? I mean, this is the thing. It's and to me, that watch is just incomparable. It's streets ahead, and so people are actually being conned out of owning the, you know, far more luxurious quality item just because it's what the influencer is pushing at them. And also the whole kind of YouTube influencer and Instagram influencer kind of thing, I kind of lost interest when it became more about who was sponsoring them. And you weren't hearing their honest opinions on horology anymore. You were hearing the brand that was sponsoring them to try and sell their watch on the quiet, and they were just using their following to push that agenda. So that's when I kind of hit unsubscribe, as they say. You know, it's kind of and for me, I personally get huge amount of enjoyment out of following people like Roger Smith and yourselves, what you're doing, and Frodshams, and people who are genuinely following the horological journey from. I mean, you're on the same track from Tompion and the people, you know, that kind of kick-started it all through George Daniels. You know, you're on the same trajectory, whereas brand engineering is something entirely different.
So the horology was always the custodians of horology were astronomers, physicists, mathematicians, and skilled craftsmen who interpreted their ideas. It was not really sort of I have no better, you know, I come from non-English speaking background, so it was not a thing of a commoner. It was a sign of sophistication, where now it's reduced to people who make money in watch industry. Really, apart from a couple of mega Swiss brands, are kids who go to China and buy $20 watches. And thanks to internet marketing, they're very, very good. They're excellent in marketing those watches. Kickstarters, startups, they're the ones who actually are leaders in horology. It's their opinion. They got far more credit, I think, than what they deserve. You know, so our attempt is we're trying to talk to people like you and others, and turn attention of general public to skilled craftsmen like yourself and many others who still call ourselves the students of horology.
I think you're right there, student of horology. I don't think a clock or a watchmaker ever finishes learning. I think the moment that you sort of close down and say, I'm an expert, I know everything, you can't teach me anything, you might as well, down tools and not bother anymore, because we're always learning. That's my take on it.
Well, another block that I think if we to structure this conversation that I would like, your comment on would be 3 elements that I'm passionate about, and I would like to hear your opinion. First thing is personal development, getting better day by day. The second thing is setting up your workshop, investing in workshop. And third thing is, transfer of knowledge, teaching other young apprentices or opening our workshop to young, enthusiastic people who would join the trade. So how do you feel about where are you when it comes to those 3 things? How do you feel like, where do you see yourself now in a year, in 5 years' time?
I mean, at the moment, I'm acting quite selfishly. I'm furthering my own skills and experience, and I've got projects that I'm hoping to further in terms of the clockmaking side of things myself. And the taking on an apprentice for me, because my infrastructure is that it's just me at the moment. So to take on an apprentice wouldn't add to my ability to work, it would actually detract. So I'm in that kind of zone at the moment where I'd love to take somebody on, but I don't feel I have enough experience to pass on yet. I'm sure I could, but I feel like I need to further my own experience first. And secondly, in fairness to them, I wouldn't be able to dedicate enough time to them to make it worth their time, because it's a big investment for, as I'm sure Andrew can say, for the apprentice to you're putting all your eggs in one basket by you're putting your whole career into the hands of the person that you apprentice to. And so it's a big responsibility from that front. So in maybe 5 years' time, I would hope I'm at a point where I will need the help, and B, I will be doing more making and manufacturing work than repairs. The balance will have tipped. So that kind of goes in more in hand with an apprentice anyway, that it divvies itself up more in being able to hand out individual tasks to build individual parts of a skill set until you come to the point, rather than just going straight in with restoration work. With restoration work is very difficult to teach, I think. You can teach a skill set, which is what obviously the college environment tries to do, but you need, for restoration work, you do need experience. And it's catch-22, you need the experience before you can work on the clock, but you need the experience working on the clock in order to so you do need to be sitting next to somebody who's got that experience to hold your hand, which is where I was very lucky. Talking about that first restorer that I worked for, there were several clockmakers in that environment, and there was a lot of knowledge in the room, and so it was a really good environment to gain experience. And so going back, I don't feel I've got that ability to pass on that experience to somebody at the moment. But yeah, maybe 5 years' time. But in answer to the original question, I would love to take on an apprentice. I definitely feel that it's a responsibility of my generation of horology to to keep it going, because we could lose this trade on our watch if we're not careful. It's, you know, there's not that much behind the trade anymore. In terms of the what we're talking about, which is the, you know, hands-on, individual, bespoke, precision element, where rather than the made in China element. So building on the legacy of the likes of George Daniels, and not letting it sort of just dwindle.
I watched a video not long ago, or was interviewed with Philip Dufour. And
another inspiration to me, absolutely.
And I'm surely you watched that video, and he said, because when the interviewer asked him, why are you not training apprentices? Because quite frankly, you're in your late 70s, and now is the time to transfer knowledge and pass it on. And he said, I've tried, but I fail because it's hard. And he said, I trained 2 or 3 apprentices, and there was another watchmaker, and he said, it's very, very hard. And you said that, and I think your approach to it, if you don't feel you're ready for it, I say take your time. Of course, you're very young, and you are still, you know, developing yourself, and you got other things to worry about. But also, there's another video, I don't know, it's an English video about a watchmaker who was at the end of his career, in his, I would say, late 90s. And unfortunately, very somber video where watchmaker said, he was asked, so sum up your life. And he said, unfortunately, it all came to nothing, because all the knowledge that I have, I can't pass on. And it was then too late. So Andrew can tell you that in our environment, in our workshop, it's not easy, Andrew, isn't it? It is a commitment to train people. And we're always nervous. And Andrew can tell you about, maybe he should tell you about how nervous we are when someone applies for a job and put hands up.
Well, it was an interesting situation relating it to kind of my first interview. Nick quite literally said, so this is what we do. If you'd like to join us, fantastic. But you have to be here for at least 10 years if you want any actual worth out of it. If you leave 9 years in, then like, what's the point? What have you done? You've half cooked your cake, sort of thing. So, you know, it was very easy for me to make that decision. But I think because we're trying to get sort of young people, they're either in a situation where they're maybe not ready yet to say, I will give you 10 years of my life, because it's too early, and they kind of, I don't know what to do, I'm still at uni. Or they've, on the other side of the coin, they may be going, well, hang on, I don't know if I want to give you 10 years, because I don't know if I want to be doing this in 10 years. I would need to be starting again. So, you know, starting as an apprentice when you're, say, mid-20s, maybe even later, is kind of difficult, because you almost have to not start your life again, but start that kind of rapid growth process, which you probably should have started when you were 18 or 16. So it's when we get new people in, we're kind of, it's not so much a kind of technical interview. It's like, you know, what have you made? What have you broken? What interests you? And then it gets to kind of that point where it's like, are you willing to sit here and screw and unscrew and sharpen and use and look and learn and get through all that kind of the sort of karate aspect of like wax on, wax off to get your skills, and then in 10 years time actually start really reaping the benefits, start going, yeah, I'm good at this, I can actually do something with this now. So that I think that's the most difficult thing. And it's annoying sometimes seeing so many people kind of saying, we want a job from overseas, from different countries, when they're kind of 40-year-old engineers who understand, if I was young, this is exactly what I'd be doing, because they know where it will lead.
It's hindsight though, isn't it? Because I mean, I've found myself regretting to an extent that I didn't really grab hold of learning with both hands. Because as we touched on earlier, you know, I didn't even finish the course because all I wanted to do was do the work. I was so passionate about doing the work And now I would absolutely love to. I mean, well, no, I would. I mean, I wouldn't give up what I'm doing now because it's, you know, I'm completely passionate about it and very lucky to be doing it. But on the flip side, alternate universe, I would love to have the opportunity to immerse myself in learning in the way that you got the opportunity with doing that. I mean,
it's harder to learn when you have to take care of customers and run a
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
and take care of yourself and your family.
Yeah.
Compared to
But at 18, 19, I wouldn't have made that decision. I didn't appreciate how much I wanted to learn at the time. Whereas now, I would love to be given the time to learn, if that makes sense. It's something that you kind of come round to thinking almost when it's too late, in a way. But I mean, going back to the sort of people coming to you, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I won't speak badly about the courses in the UK because they're doing their best and they are improving. They're getting better. But certainly when I was training, they weren't leading the world, shall we say, in terms of horological education. But the thing that did happen is you'd got people leaving after 3 years going, here's my certificate. I'm an expert. I know everything there is. You know, where's my £40,000 salary? And then you wouldn't trust them to overhaul the Westminster chime in reality, because they've got their specific expertise from college in the safety of the college bubble, and they might have all kinds of experience about some research that they've done on using PTFE and horological gearing, or whatever. But you say, right, it's down to earth with a bump now. Here's a clock in a repair environment, and they don't know what to do, and they're completely out of their comfort zone. And yet they've been taught this attitude at college that they've got the certificate. That's it. Tick.
Well, it's that experience behind the bench. It takes time to mature. And I again watched another video of yours last night, actually, when you talk about making a balance cock. It was a cock which was the previous repair made it by fabricating it, putting it together from 3 pieces, silver soldering, and that probably not the best solution. But the mistake that he made, and he could have done better and should have done better, the cock pointed upwards instead of downward. And when I saw that coming. Just because I've seen so many issues like that, and
I couldn't understand I still can't quite understand the mindset of doing that. All I can think is that he cut it correctly, and then soldered the stack with it the wrong way up, and then thought, oh, sod it, I can't be bothered to change it.
Can't be bothered.
And left it. That's all. That's the only justification I can find for it in my head.
Little gems. You have to be behind the bench. You have to spend your time behind the bench and build the expertise and knowledge and just experience. And you can't get that purely by following influencers and reading watch forums. And this is why, out of all people out there who now claim horology, small guys like you and us, we're the ones who train people, and we, not even big brands. Anyway, another thing, I would like you to tell me a couple of things about what you do right now. What gets you, out of bed, and what is probably the most exciting part of your journey right now, where you are, and then we will talk about number 4. But first, tell me what you do.
Yeah. At the moment, the business is largely restoration, and I do some clock making as well. So the clock making is from scratch, and but as I say, largely it's restoration, and so it's a bit of a kind of a. I think it's always been the way really with clockmakers. You have to earn your crust, so you restore clocks, and then you're always sort of trying to make a clock in the background. And I've known so many clockmakers through my career now who've said, one day I've got this idea for a clock, and you think to yourself, yeah, but you're 75 now, you know, it's kind of, and you still haven't done it, and you've been talking about that your whole career, and I think it's sad, you know, so many clockmakers have just got sucked into repairing because they have to earn money, and it's difficult to force your way into the clockmaking thing. I've been quite forceful with myself that I've sat down and I've said to myself, where do I want to be? What do I want to achieve? I want to make clocks in the way that George Daniels made watches. I want to be a clockmaker, and at the moment I restore clocks to help build my experience, because you can't jump straight into making the finest clocks in the world without having soaked up as much of everybody who's gone before you's ideas and ability that you've got available to you. So you have to do restoration work, but I'm being very careful not to get sucked down that avenue totally. I'm forcing myself into the avenue of actually making bespoke clocks. So yeah, it's a bit of both, but mainly restoration at the moment, and I'm pushing down the clock making side of things.
I'm glad you put priorities right, because often we talk about the youngsters here. There are people all over the world who follow George Daniels' method. They go and buy a book, and they want the first watch is going to be a tourbillon, and again, there's nothing wrong with this. Who am I to judge? But I think those kids they don't realize, or they don't think of George Daniels as becoming the most eminent expert on Breguet before he even attempted to make something seriously complex. I think he spent 40 years restoring Breguet.
I think I'm right in saying that he was doing watch repairs and jobbing restoration work before that. You know, it just doesn't have as many pages in the biography. It's, because of everything that came afterwards. But I definitely think you need that grounding, because I don't know whether you do this with watches and with your watch design, but I think Andrew touched on it earlier, saying about like calendar design and things when you're doing repairs. But certainly where the type of restoration work I do now tends to be the higher end sort of precision regulators and high quality stuff, tends to be. And when you get to work on a lot of precision regulators like that, I'm always stripping something down, and I'll think, I love the way he's done that. I love that little detail on the maintaining tower, or I wouldn't have thought of doing it like that, or he's held the wheels on like this, and I'm building up this kind of stock of ideas of detail, and so when I come to really let my hair down in the which lockdown hair is, it gives me somewhere to come from. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I've got all these ideas that I've picked up over the years doing restoration work, but then my first clock, ironically, is not of my design. I've made a clock completely from scratch myself so far, and that's actually a facsimile, a replica of a nib, 1675 Joseph nib. And the story behind that was that it's a long case, and the client didn't actually realize what he'd got. He'd got a Victorian long case clock, and I saw it from across the room and thought, that's an interesting dial. And it was IV on the dial instead of 4 strokes, the number 4. So instantly I was like, sparked my interest, because there's one maker really that you can associate that to, and for Roman striking.
Was it a single-handed, one hand only on a dial?
No, two hands. Two hands. But are you familiar with Joseph Nibb's?
All in passing. I've seen a number of photos. I've read a little bit about him, but
well,
I've seen
some
bracket clocks that he made, and now that you ask me, that frost-finished silver dials and very typical hands, that is
exactly,
something.
Yeah. Hang on, bear with me one moment. I'll show you. So that's a David Penny that you're probably familiar with.
Yep.
And you can see the IV before instead of 4 strokes. And that's for a specific strike system, which is the Roman striking. And so instead of striking out 1 to 12, it will have 2 bells, and it will strike I's and V's. So for 12 o'clock, you've got 4 blows, because you've got 2 V's making up a 10 and 2 strokes. So long duration is much easier to achieve, because you've got the, you don't need as many hammer blows. So that was the reason behind it. But I saw this dial.
It's a shorthand of striking.
Shorthand of striking, exactly. Yeah. So I saw this dial from across the room, and I thought, yeah. So I kind of charged over to it, thinking, there's this Nibb 3-month striking Roman striking movement in this Victorian case. Got there, Victorian movement as well.
No.
But for some reason, original dial. So it got the original dial and the original hands, would you believe it? But everything else was Victorian later. So anyway, I was doing some other clocks for him, and I got to the estimate for this clock, and it was almost a kind of a throwaway comment. It was kind of, oh, do you know what this should look like? It would have looked like originally. And he was like, no. So I did a bit of research, and I gave him some photographs and things of original ones, and they're very rare. This particular type of humpback movement, and I showed it him, and he was like, "Oh wow, such a shame." And I said, "Well, I could make the rest of it for you around the dial, almost like a throwaway comment." And he said, "Price it up for me." So I was then like, "Oh God." So I kind of, I was lucky that he was such a good customer like that, and so I gave him a price to do it, which wasn't enough, but these things rarely are. And he said, yeah, okay. So I made the movement. I didn't make the case myself, but the case was made by a good friend of mine who's a cabinet maker. But I made the movement from scratch, and the weights and everything else, and it was a 3-month duration, 2 1/4 pendulum with Roman striking. And there are 1 or 2 of them around in museums and collections, but I tried to get at them, and I've got no track record, I've got nothing to show or anything at the time, and it was closed doors. Nobody would let me go and look at original examples. So I managed to get hold of enough photographs and drawings from people who'd restored them in the past. And so I just made it, reverse engineered it and made it. And then the response I had as a result was, you did an absolutely fantastic job of that. You should have asked. You could have come and looked at the one at so-and-so. It was like, oh yeah, now you say, it's.
But that's rewarding. That is a huge compliment.
so that is my proudest achievement to date, is making that clock. And yeah, I was yeah, very, very proud of that. But it took me off the first rung of the ladder, that I wasn't talking about making clocks anymore. I've actually, gone through the whole process of, I probably made life was more difficult for that one, because I wasn't just designing it myself. I was having to reverse engineer it to fit the holes of the dial, and and to fit in with the style of an existing movement. But it got the process under my belt, if you like.
How long it took you to complete the project?
I worked on it on and off. I didn't work on it solidly over about 6 months, probably.
That's not bad at all.
Picking it up and putting it down, and there were some bits of it on YouTube videos actually, but it was before I was really doing it properly, and I probably need to do like an overview video of the whole thing, really. There were just some snippets of machining bits of it online at the moment.
Second question. When I saw an Instagram post by you and a photo of the clock that you worked on,
yeah,
I was shocked. I was jealous. I felt intimidated. And I just could not believe it. I could not believe it that you, and the comment that you made resonated so well. And it was special to me when you said that the maker of that clock is probably one of the greatest living clockmakers in the world of our time. And this is exactly how I felt about it. And tell me about the maker and tell me about the clock.
We are referring to what I know as clock number 4 by Buchanan's, and that is a tour de force of modern horology. It's a wall-mounted regulator after the style of the Breguet regulators, which are on the resonance principle. So it's a double pendulum, and this particular one has got double Harrison gridirons, and the front bob's actually got a thermometer in it as well. And some temperature compensated pendulums use the compensation as the way of doing the thermometer. But this was actually, it's got a beautiful curved bimetallic strip inside the thermometer. But yeah, it's a tour de force. It's obviously a collection of, like I was saying earlier, you see ideas as you're working on things, and I think the concept of it was from a particular client who'd seen elements that he liked in other clocks, and he'd said to them, I want to include these. I don't know its complete history in terms of the design, so Derek Notes would be able to tell the story better than me, I'm guessing, to an extent. But it looks to me, it reads to me as a sort of a collection of the greatest hits of horology, and then Buchanan's have turned it up to 11, and it's now quite a thing to behold. And you've got 2 movements, obviously, 1 movement for each pendulum, and you've got gravity escapements. You've got it's a form of remontoire, but it's not actually truly a remontoire because the clock will run without it. It's actually a way of giving you a second hand, basically. That it's got a form of Aries remontoire escapement, which is driving what looks to be a second escape wheel, but the second escape wheel is to give you the offbeats, because you've got a impulse in one direction of a seconds pendulum. You either settle for having a seconds hand that does 2-second jumps, or he's actually put in a system where he's using a remontoire system to drive a count wheel, if you like, rather than an escape wheel, which gives you a seconds hand. So now you've got two seconds hands going around for the for the two escape loads. But yeah, absolute privilege to work on. I suppose I could confidently say I'm the only person in the world, other than Derek Noakes, to handle a clock like that.
His clocks.
Because to my knowledge, that's the only one of his clocks that's ever been worked on other than him. So so it was a huge honor and a privilege to be chosen to do the work. It was, you know, it really does humble me in a way to have done it. And and it was that watchmaking approach that you were talking about earlier. Was that approach was what gave me the confidence to say yes, because I just thought to myself, it's intimidating. It's a clock and a half, but what can go wrong? It's a clock. You know, I'll just go through it systematically and you know, just do it quietly and gently, and you know, so that's what I did.
And for those who are not familiar with Derek, Derek is South African who spent a number of years in London and in England, and had an opportunity to study horology there, and started working on the clocks and made his name and reputation there. And then for some reason migrated to Australia, and he's 2 hours further west from us. And
right, okay.
You would love this. I remember now. It was on a Christmas morning last year. No, it was day before. It was day before Christmas last year, and I was thinking, I wanted to give a present to Andrew and Bobby and Josh, my son, a Christmas present, but I wanted to be special, and to myself. And I thought, if I can, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call Derek out of blue. And I'm going to say, Derek, I follow your work. I know who you are. I would like to come down from Sydney with my apprentices so we can say hello and you show us what you work on. And he goes, no. I said, well, absolutely straight. I said, why? He's the nicest guy ever. He was genuinely surprised that I would want that as my Christmas present. And I told him, I love what you do, and this will be a great opportunity because we're busy on every day, almost, you know, a whole year round. I don't have time. You don't have time. And I'm thinking, you know, if we sneak in your workshop. And he goes, he was still surprised that someone will call out of blue, you know, and make demand like that. And I said, yeah. He said, well, how about some other time? In 3 months' time, give me a call. I'm, you know, working on a project. I said, it's really tomorrow or never. He goes, fine, I'll give you 15 minutes. So we drove there next morning. We're there on a minute. And he spent most of the morning with us, over 4 hours. And it was the most wonderful experience. I have to say, the most wonderful experience of my entire horological, experience of meeting another maker, or meeting another, and we talk, you know, that's me, and you know, that's Derek. So for our Australian viewers, that we now have a right to claim the best living clockmaker in the world. Yeah. Sorry, your loss.
Well, I mean, it's certainly. I wouldn't make that claim in an uneducated way. It's from the work that I've handled from modern makers, and I haven't handled, you know, work from everybody, but to my knowledge, there's nobody else out there doing anything quite like they are, and maybe one other maker doing similar things in terms of the double pendulum type stuff. But I've first-hand handled, so you're going to get 12 o'clock now. I've first-hand handled work from from them as well, and it's in no way comparable. The Buchanan is just up here. It's not just design and concept. It's execution and finish. It's almost, I mean, it's not quite watchmaking level of finish, but it's not far off. And if you imagine watchmaking level of finish on the scale of a clock, that's some serious work, you know, to get to that stage. So yeah, it is exceptional on that front. A lot of it is technically it's there for the sake of being there. It doesn't need to be there to be as accurate. As I said to the client, I could probably strip away, you know, I could give you about 40% of this clock back in a box, and it'll work better, if anything, than it does now. But that's not the point of that clock. It's a tour de force of all this different these different elements, and it's the whole object in all its complexity that is, you know, what's appreciated. Have you sat looking at the video just for ages, just looking at the escapement?
Well, he's got 2 clocks there in his workshop, and I had the opportunity to see them both in action, and it is amazing. Well, you know,
did you see the Breguet replica that he's just finished?
Yes.
The double pendulum.
Double pendulum, yes.
Yeah.
And
it's got a chimney up the backboard.
I know. Well, I don't know I'm not sure if the Queen is too happy about, you know, having another clock made by.
Yeah, that's true.
On the way back to Sydney, we're in a car. Unfortunately, Andrew couldn't join us on that day. Andrew, you missed the most exciting bit of your 3 years experience with us. On the way back, we came together to conclusion that we can probably sell most of the tools and equipment and machinery that we already have in our workshop, and because we probably don't need any of that, because you can achieve so much with far less of CNC input. But he is genius. He is absolute genius. He's mechanical genius, and you know, he's a self-taught clockmaker.
Yeah,
self-taught clockmaker.
Yeah.
So well, I'm so glad. You know, this is a connection between two of us. We share something. You know, we have something in common. We admire Derek. And
definitely. Yeah.
Tony,
so my next restoration project that you'll see on YouTube soon. Well, it's not a restoration project. It's a servicing project. It's another double pendulum, and that's by David Walter.
Oh.
So and this is a release because David Walter doesn't know that I'm working on it yet, so we'll see.
Well,
but that's coming in for a service and a little bit of a fault finding mission. So yeah, that's going to be another fun one. But I was thinking to myself, I mean, not wanting to be too big-headed, but I wonder how many people are there out there who worked on two double pendulum clocks.
Well, there you go. Very good. Very inspiring, Tommy. I mean, I planned this interview to go for 15, 20 minutes. I have no idea how long we're talking about. This probably will be 2 parts YouTube video, but I really, really thank you for your time. And
thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. And you are inspiration in a sense that we love people like you who are small and independent, but enthusiastic and who build their skills and proud to call themselves as students of horology. Andrew, and is there anything you would like to ask Tommy before we finish? I mean, now is your opportunity to ask him.
Well, I did have a list of questions, actually. Most of them were answered, which was really good. I will say before I do ask you one question.
Yeah.
That clock that went off at 12 o'clock, I'm watching on my MacBook here, International Apple Time. And that was absolutely exactly on the second. I was like, wow, I
Well, that was a
suppose, you know,
fluke.
only
You
expected,
can't
I
fake that.
suppose.
Yeah, no, that's just a long case that I have in my office here. It's yeah, nothing too special.
Very good. Well, it's in time with the atomic clock that's in the
Well,
middle
that's
of
good
America
because I haven't
somewhere.
wound it up yet this week, so that's after a week as well.
Oh, that's very good. I did have one question, and most of the kind of more serious questions I think have been answered, but I know that it's kind of everyone has a story or two in regards to kind of workshop tragedies and this sort of thing. Is there anything where you've maybe, well, two questions, I suppose. One is injury. I'm always interested to hear about clockmaking injuries because there's a lot more force in the kind of movement than there is with a watch. Usually with a watch, you kind of stab yourself with tweezers or something like this.
Yep.
Have you had any sort of massive, you know, injuries or near misses where you've almost had a finger chopped off or something like this?
Yeah,
Or have you been lucky?
near misses, and that's probably partly down to the fact that clockmaking is more light engineering, so you're using bigger equipment, and also the types of people who would normally be using that equipment might have had some more training in that equipment than a clockmaker often does. So there was one occasion that was the first and last time that I ever tried to push I think it was about a 5mm drill, something like that, through a piece of brass in a filler drill without the work clamp down. And it picked the piece up, spun it around a couple of times to threaten me, and then threw it at me. And my nail still grows with a flat down it. And I was really lucky because basically it sort of hit the back of my thumb, and you know, it did cut me a bit on the back of my thumb. And as I say, it's kind of made my nail grow funny ever since. But it smacked the back of my hand with the flat of the plate. If that had been the edge on, then I might not have this hand properly. So that was a wake up, and I have never since, you know, that was the only education I needed on that front. Everything is clamped down everywhere now. That's it.
If that had happened, I suppose David Walter might be a little bit more nervous about you touching his clocks.
Yeah.
Very good.
I have them spinning around a milling machine or something.
Yeah. I have one more question, which is probably more a question for myself and maybe anyone who's watching, possibly who is an apprentice or who
Andrew, do you seriously
maybe wants to get into it?
Do you seriously believe that someone is going to watch this for an hour and a half?
Yeah, maybe not. They can skip
we're
to the end.
we're the only people there
Left.
I was going to say, do you have any advice for the kind of lowly apprentice who's, you know, just trying to make his mark kind of thing? Is there something that you maybe came across through your like learning progress where you went, oh, this is important, and when I do have an apprentice, I'm going to make sure that I sort of drill this into them? Maybe like a piece of wisdom from someone who's taught you.
Yeah, it's attitude towards the work. They've got to be methodical. They've got to be considered. If they come at it from I know best, I've seen one of these before, bum bum bum, break. Oh, hang on a minute. They've got to treat everything with respect and just be considered. Just pause, think about it, think about the interaction the part that you're working on has with another part, or if you undo that screw, what's actually going to happen? Oh yeah, there's still power on there. I didn't think of that. That's, you know, that type of thing, you know. So it's mindset, I think, is the thing. Just slow down and consider what you're doing. Yeah, and I think you can go far wrong if you do that with anything. You know,
that's quite funny, I suppose. Like right at the start of kind of learning how to, because we're very cautious. I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to break this. I know I'm going to break it. I didn't break anything, and then that point where you kind of get a little bit more confident and you think, oh no, I can do. I know this now. I've worked on it a few times. That's exactly the moment where the kind of watch gods decide to go, ha ha. Yeah. No, you don't, sort of thing. Yeah. So that's fair enough. Yeah.
And in watchmaking, there's another little tip that I think is worth its weight in gold. I don't know if you use them, but I was taught very early on to use a black cloth. And
I have seen this, yeah.
The watch houses it's like completely foreign. It's like they've never even thought of it. But if you just have an old pillowcase or something, just pinned to the bottom of your bench and just looped up and over your knees, you can get away with anything then. You know, it's like that Inca block spring, it's right there in front of you. In the middle. You know, it's like, instead of spending the next 3/4 of an hour on your hands and knees, which is, we've all done that, whether we admit it or not.
Fair enough.
Tommy,
well, thank you very much for your wisdom.
Tommy, it was absolute pleasure to have you on a channel, and to have you as a I wouldn't say guest, as a colleague, as someone we certainly have a lot in common, and your freedom to make right to repair shirt and mug has been mailed to you.
Oh, thank you.
Last week.
There we go. Yeah.
We can talk about this for ages, but next time when we talk, hopefully it will arrive by then.
Brilliant.
Keep putting stuff on Instagram. We are followers and subscribers, and we love your posts. And same with the YouTube, and link to YouTube channel will be in description of this video. And once again, thank you very much for your time. And I'm looking forward your video showing a Tommy Jobson dial clock soon.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. And thank you very much for reaching out to me. It's an honour to be approached by you, because we haven't really talked about your work, but I'm hugely inspired by what you're doing for the watch industry and your approach to it all. And yeah, I think that shouldn't go unsaid. You're doing some fantastic work.
Thank you very much, Tommy. All the best to you and yours, and see you in the next video.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.